Hey everyone, welcome to another week at Nintendo this week. I'm Brandon Miracle, and we've got more Nintendo Switch 2 to talk about. Today I'm joined by John Cartwright and Steve Bowling to discuss what we think will come to the Switch 2 as its launch lineup. And real quick, I'm just going to throw it right at you, John.
Me?
What do you got?
Yeah. Well, we've seen a video game, in fact. In the Switch 2 trailer, Mario Kart is there. And given that they are showing it with the system as the first game we're seeing, I would be shocked if that thing doesn't launch with a console. And we haven't had a Mario Kart for like 11 years at this point. So Insane. It is a big game. It is the best-selling Switch game by far. And it's kind of a huge statement to launch the console with that thing.
Yeah, what do you think about it? About that, Steve?
I mean, it would be really weird to give us this bare bones trailer and show precisely one game and then be like, that game is not coming at launch. So, I mean, to be clear, that would be a very Nintendo thing to do. But I agree with John. It's been over a decade since we had a new numbered entry in the Mario Kart series or new mainline entry, I'll say, because John and I discussed on the previous episode, this may not be a numbered entry. It might just be a subtitled entry, but regardless to say, Mario Kart team's been cooking something for the last 11 years. It would be really weird for it to miss launch.
Right. And like the last, with the Switch 1, the headliner of that trailer was Breath of the Wild. That was the first game we saw, and it was the big launch title of the system. So there isn't much discussion about whether that's going to launch the console. And even if it doesn't, it's at least launch window. But I'd be shocked if it doesn't launch with Switch 2.
I guess that begs another question then. Is this something that they will pack in as a possible SKU?
No way.
Are they done with pack-ins, do you think? Because like Switch and Breath of the Wild as a combo, like you bought them both, it retains its value. I don't know if having a pack-in does anything for them.
Yeah, at this point, I think that Nintendo has proven that they don't need it, right? And we know historically that Nintendo of Japan was very against Wii Sports being packed in with the Wii. And Nintendo of America had to push for it and fight for it. I think that backed up by the data that the Switch has given them, Nintendo of Japan would easily win that argument this time around.
Yeah. Like Wii Sports was very much a case of like everyone needs to play this because it was a demonstration of the hardware. Switch 2, I don't think you need that demonstration because there doesn't seem to be a core gimmick this time. And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has sold, like 60 million or something radical like that? So I don't think they'll look at that figure and say, just give it to everyone for free.
There's also the argument to be made that once, you buy a Switch 2, you're very likely a Switch 1 owner, and you're going to have an entire library that you'll be able to play on launch day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, entire library with the exception of like some games. That little asterisk at the bottom is still sitting in my mind.
That's true. But I can only imagine. I imagine that's only a select few games, probably games that use the IR sensor, maybe. But, Mario Kart 9 might be the only game we actually know about, but it's not going to be the only game that comes out when the Switch 2 does. And Steve, what's another game you think will hit store shelves the day that Switch 2 drops?
So John and I posited about a few of these in the last episode. So I'm going to try to stay away from those because I am thinking that there's a game that we know nothing about. And it's John mentioned that like Wii Sports was a showcase for the hardware. And whether you like it or not, so was 1-2 Switch. 1-2 Switch was meant to show off what the hardware could do. It used every bell and whistle on the Switch. So I'm going to say that there will be a game like that. I have no clue what the hell it will be, but specifically, it'll be a game that shows off the mouse pointer functionality for the Switch 2 Joy-Con because they made a point to show, and I had to re-watch the trailer to actually catch this happen, but they made a point to show the Joy-Con landing into the Joy-Con strap magnetically and then racing along the table.
It glides, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so I think that they're going to have some game that heavily utilizes that, and it's going to be some quirky, weird Nintendo thing, like a WarioWare or a 1-2 Switch type game that will specifically show off like what the use case is for that new functionality in particular.
Mario Paint 2 launching this console. I actually had a third-party game listed in my little list here, Baldur's Gate 3, but I wasn't considering mouse support when I put it down. And now that I'm thinking about it further, like that's perfect. Like
That makes
there's
more
a
sense.
PlayStation port already, controller support works, but having a full-on PC experience, like that's perfect for the mouse.
That is. I didn't even think about that because Baldur's Gate 3, I have played primarily on PS5 and it's not super great. Like to play with a controller. It would be much better with a mouse.
You know, you're talking about games that would show off mouse support really well, and I wonder if snipper clips might find its way back.
I hope so.
Because I can imagine just like, you know, point and click, drawing the shape you want to cut out and solving puzzles that way, rather than, you know, the overlapping of the original game. They may not want to fly too close to the Switch 1 sun, but, you know, snipper clips has been missing since the Plus edition of the original game came out, and I think that'd be a fun way to return to that.
This is definitely not a launch title because they've got Mario Kart filling the racing gap. But F-Zero has done 2 level editors before. One in X with the DD kit and another with Climax. And how perfect would the mouse be for a track editor?
Ooh. God, that'd be awesome. I hate using track editors like on console. You know, we played around with the one in Climax on NSO, and you know, it's fairly intuitive for what it is. But I wouldn't want to sit there and do that for more than
Well, it's like X
20,
on the
30
N64.
minutes.
It's like free form drawing with the tracks, and like with an analog stick, you can do it, but it would just be absolutely flawless just to drag that mouse around.
Yeah, it would make navigating the menu and collecting the or selecting the items from the inventory that you want to use a lot easier. And I could see that saving a lot of time and being a big selling point. I also think there's possibly a chance that we get a Mario Maker. Maybe not at launch, but I don't think that's something they're going to wait on.
It'll be a big upgrade, you know, because like they did their best assigning everything to a controller in Mario Maker 2, but it just never felt intuitive. It never felt quite as right as the Wii U game, and this would solve everything.
I have to wonder, though, because we're talking a lot about mouse support, and if you play your Switch docked, your Switch 2 docked, mouse support becomes a bit more tricky unless you have like a mouse pad on the sofa with you or you have a table next to you while you sit. Do we think that Nintendo will do something like, do we think we're going to get like another plastic mouse pad, or do we think that possibly even the Pro Controller will have a touchpad to replicate mouse input to kind of make this easier for people who primarily play in docked mode?
That is an interesting question. It is worth noting that we didn't even see the Pro Controller today.
Yeah, we did.
We don't know if it's changed in any way. So that's a possibility.
I hope it has analog triggers. The triggers seem to be digital on the actual Joy-Con themselves, but it'd be really nice to have like full-on racing games with proper inputs with the Pro Controller.
Oh, yes, please.
Let the Pro Controller earn the name Pro.
Yeah. Can I throw out another game, though?
Go for it.
This, I don't know the likelihood, but they are building this fella up. So I've been pulling this out on the other win. Our buddy DK got a game today, and Donkey Kong has been done dirty since Tropical Freeze. He has not had another installment since then. But he has had multimedia expansions. We've had the theme park. He's in the Mario movie. He's got a brand new design in Mario Kart 9. Clearly, if they're redesigning this guy, if they're doing so much with him, they have big plans, right? And if we have Mario Kart as a launch title, an adjacent game, it might not be smart to do 3D Mario or 2D Mario, just because that might be Mario overload, but Donkey Kong, I think maybe you could.
Yeah, I mean, having it kind of reminds me of the Castlevania trailer for Smash Brothers, where Luigi showed up in his Luigi's Mansion 3 design, despite that game having not been revealed yet.
Right.
It makes me wonder if they're pulling double duty with Donkey Kong there, and this is his design in a game that is currently not yet unveiled, but they're future-proofing his Mario Kart design with that.
I think that would make sense. And Donkey Kong has a lot to build on. They've been doing something with a lot of Switch franchises where they basically put everything on there. So like Pikmin and Xenoblade, Donkey Kong now with the return support, like all the entries are on the Switch now. So the base is there to keep growing it. And with Donkey Kong, he's never tried anything but a 2D side-scroller. Returns and Tropical Freeze, very similar. Country 1, 2, and 3, very similar. I'm up for something very different with DK, whether he's going
DK
3D.
64?
64 is different, for sure. That's true. But like, I want DK in like a city environment. Like, I'm thinking like New Donk City, but way bigger. Donkey Kong swinging on, I don't know, on like phone lines or something. I think there's something really fun you can do with Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I could see that being a really fun title to try. Admittedly, I'm not the world's biggest Donkey Kong fan, but there has to be something there, because it feels weird to me that Nintendo would dedicate a section of Super Nintendo World to Donkey Kong before, say, Legend of Zelda, Pikmin, Pokemon, like games that have, or franchises that have had more popular entries more recently. It just feels like they have to know something we don't, because the Mario movie, I don't think, is enough to really justify building a whole theme park section over. So I agree with you, John. There has to be something in the works at Nintendo. And it's quite possibly, going to come either right alongside the Switch 2 or within that first year. I would say that's a pretty safe bet.
They're cooking something. Whether it's a launch title or not, they are definitely cooking something.
Not to go back to the mouse controls again, but I think another potential like launch title or even launch window, and it's not even a title necessarily or a new title necessarily. It might be an update, but I could see them adding mouse support to Pikmin 1.
Pikmin 1? Yeah.
Pikmin 1, yeah. Just as like an experimental, here's one of the things that we can do with mouse mode on Switch 2. There are ways to play that game with a mouse already, but it would be really cool to be able to do that on official hardware.
It will be interesting what they go back to. Like, Pikmin 1 would be shocking, but it'd be so cool if they did. In terms of like a brand new game, this is to the point, but one of my favorite Wii U launch titles was Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Wii U Edition, because not only was it a great game, but they gave every character a Nintendo costume. So every single person could be Mario or Link or Zelda or Captain Falcon. And we're a little bit divided from Tekken 8 now, like a year from its original launch, where I think that kind of gimmick is kind of needed again to make this version exciting. So I'd love for them to bring back all those Nintendo costumes for Tekken 8 on Switch 2.
Tekken 8 for Switch 2 would be amazing. I've actually tried to learn that game a bit, and I've had a lot of fun with it. I think it's excellent. It's just I agree that if you're going to drop it on Switch, it needs something new. But I'm glad you brought up fighting games, John, because we talked about this. We touched on it briefly with Capcom on the last episode. Street Fighter 6, baby.
No
Street
brain.
Fighter
It's
6
coming.
is the fighting game. And just, it's gotta be there. And I figured, we had Street Fighter 2, Ultra Street Fighter 2 at the beginning of the Switch life cycle. Street Fighter 6 at the beginning of the Switch 2 would be an incredible get. I mean, it already is Steam Deck certified, so it should be fairly simple to get it running pretty well on Switch.
It's a PlayStation 4 game as well. Anything that ran on the PS4 is guaranteed. It's a PS4 game. It's cross-gen.
Street Fighter 6 is cross-gen.
It is a cross-gen game.
I never realized that.
Yeah, it's on PS4 and Xbox One.
I've never played it on last gen, so that's interesting. Yeah, then that makes it practically a shoo-in. I mean, people are saying that that the Switch 2 specs are in line with the PS4 already. So yeah, that should be a simple matter. Oh, that's exciting.
Speaking of PS4 games, actually, now I can't remember if this was a PS4 game. I don't think it was.
Yeah, throw it out there.
Elden Ring?
Elden Ring's a PS4 game as well, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be shocking if Elden Ring didn't come to Switch 2, either at launch or in the first few months. Because, with the Switch 1, they had Skyrim. It wasn't there at launch, but they used it as they used it in the teaser trailer for the console. And I think having like a notable third-party like grittier kind of hardcore game like Elden Ring would attract a lot of people.
And we were saying during the previous win that there are a bunch of publishers who just did what they could on the Switch, and Dark Souls Remastered came to the Switch. Obviously, Dark Souls 3 couldn't, Elden Ring couldn't, Sekiro couldn't, but they did what they could. And now that the barrier's way higher, I think they absolutely will. Rockstar's in a similar position. They did GTA the Trilogy, they did LA Noire, they did Red Dead Redemption. And even like with Stalker 2, we had the Stalker PC games ported to Switch, the first 3. So clearly they were doing what they could. And I think pretty much every publisher out there wants their games on the Switch. It's just a matter of whether they can run them. And with Switch 2, that's less of a question.
Yeah, I agree with that. We posited that there's even potential for GTA 5 or even 6, to come to the Switch too. Depending on how they build those games out. I'm very curious though, like, do we think that there's a possibility for Elden Ring? I think Elden Ring has high potential to be a day one game because it's been out for a while. Shadow of the Erdtree's been out for a while. You could do a complete edition on Switch 2, presumably within, whenever this launches, because I assume Bandai Namco, being a super close partner with Nintendo, has had dev kits for quite some time. Do we think that it'll get the new, maybe not on launch, but do we think that the newly announced Elden Ring spin-off game will come to Switch 2?
Yeah. I don't see why not.
Yeah, it just seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it?
Does that game support crossplay? Do we know that yet?
I don't know if it does.
I don't think we know anything about it yet.
Well, the beta test period for that is in a couple weeks, I think.
Yeah.
But if it had crossplay, having it on Switch 2, that'd be even better.
Yeah. Another big supporter of Switch, Atlas. 13 Sentinels, they've done all the Persona games. Metaphor and Persona 3 Reload feel like no-brainers.
Easy.
I would love Metaphor to be on there. I played through that game on the PS5 and it got its hooks into me way deeper than I thought it ever could. I played it mostly because I know Daniel loves it and I wanted to see what the hype was about. And it ended up getting me too. And I'm already a few hours into New Game Plus on that game. So I kind of want to do what I did with Persona and hold off and see if they release it on Switch 2 and then just do another playthrough over there. I want to rewind for just a sec, though, to Bandai Namco. Sparking Zero has to be day one, right?
I'd be surprised if it wasn't there. I mean, it runs on Steam Deck, so I don't see why not.
And they ported, is it Xenoverse? They did Xenoverse 2. They ported during the Switch's
Xenoverse 1, 2, Fighters, and Kakarot.
Yeah, they absolutely are, no doubt.
Sparking Zero is a cash cow. Having that on Switch 2 would be good.
Yeah.
I was thinking that it might be interesting if Capcom came to Switch 2 with not necessarily an exclusive Resident Evil title, but a new Resident Evil game that would line up with the Switch 2's launch. And I'm thinking something smaller scale, like a Mercenaries type game. Mercenaries 3D on 3DS, I played the ever-living crap out of.
Hell yeah.
And I would love a new version of that launches, alongside Switch 2, but available on everything with crossplay support.
I mean, Capcom are absolutely going to flood this thing with the back catalog. 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, they're all coming.
You know what I want out of all of those more than anything? I want a version of the original RE4, like the Wii version, where you just get to use the Joy-Con mouse in place of the Wii pointer.
I would love that. They didn't even give the Switch version of RE4 gyro, though, for some reason.
Criminal.
Actual
criminal activity.
5 had it. They said, give it to 5. 4 doesn't need it, though. What were you doing there, Capcom? I'd love that. That'd be really cool. But back on the idea of an original Resident Evil, though. A remake of Zero is pretty likely. I wonder if that could line up with Switch 2 launch, but I would eat up a standalone Mercenaries game. So the 3DS version was really cool, but it was also quite lacking. Leon wasn't even in it, and there were very few stages, but a big, an ultimate version of Mercenaries with every stage from previous games remade, some new ones, a huge all-cast character. I would love all-cast roster. I would love that.
I would also take a Revelations 3. I think those you mentioned this on Bluesky recently. Those first two games are really underappreciated. They're both very good games, and one mode in those games I think people often overlook is raid mode. Raid mode is ridiculous. The fact that the mode exists at all is insane. It's co-op multiplayer with like RPG elements and upgrading, and it's super fun. And I'd love Revelations 3 just for a new raid mode alone.
Same. Can we talk about Square Enix a second?
Yes, please.
They came to the Switch launch with I Am Setsuna, and they have been supporting the Switch very rapidly. Every Final Fantasy game is on there. Every Dragon Quest game they could have done is on there. They've done so much for the Switch. And there are certain games they couldn't have done. With lots of rumors going around about Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. I think it makes a lot of sense to launch a remake, wait a few months, and then also try Rebirth, just to pad out the release cycle. But 7 Remake sounds extremely likely to launch with Switch 2.
Yeah, that's a game that I would be surprised if it did not.
Yeah, like, and that's also a PS4 game, right?
Yeah, there's so much pull though for something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it would be kind of poetic to finally have that on Switch after Cloud's been in Smash for 2 games.
Yeah, I wonder, and the only thing that makes me kind of cast a bit of doubt there, I think Remake is a great fit. I wonder if the Switch 2 can run Rebirth, and I guess it'll be interesting to see how the PC release of Rebirth pans out, because I think that'll tell us a lot of what we need to know about how scalable Square Enix has designed that game to be. Like, if it can go down to like really lower level PC hardware and still run, then I think that they'll likely have found suitable specs to, or suitable settings to run it on Switch 2. That said, I think unless they're doing both games with plans to eventually put the third game on Switch 2, then unless that's the case, then we won't get any of them or whatever. Yeah. But I think if we get Remake, we're definitely getting Rebirth. There's no way they give us just the first game in a trilogy and then say, all right, see ya. But Square's public statements about wanting to be on more than just PlayStation, really that reads as just we want to be on Nintendo.
Yeah, like realistically, Xbox is not in that conversation. They can put their games on there. They're not going to change anything. Some people will buy them, but it's not going to drastically change the outcome of that game.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the remake of Crisis Core is already on Switch.
That's correct.
I've actually played through it on Switch, and it made me feel like, okay, Remake could run on Switch 1. I felt like Remake could run, albeit a much downgraded version. But Xbox is such a non-factor for Square. I remember vividly going to E3 one year to play Final Fantasy 15, and this was back when I was nobody, and I just kind of showed up and was like, hey, could I play for my blog? And they were like, oh yeah, if you're interested in playing Xbox. And I was like, I don't care. And they took me to the completely empty Xbox demos station. Like, all of the Xboxes were there running the same exact game and no one was playing it, but the PS4s running the same game were completely packed. You couldn't get in one.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think Square knows that the Xbox audience just isn't really turning out for them, and this'll be but the Nintendo audience almost certainly will.
Yeah, Xbox have to go to Game Pass to kind of get these games on their systems. Like, I'd be shocked if Final Fantasy VII Remake is confirmed for Xbox and isn't part of Game Pass, because I don't think people will buy it otherwise. And Japanese developers just need Switch 2 right now, and I reckon a lot of games are going to be built around it from the ground up. So I have little doubt that the vast majority of Japanese games are going to come to Switch 2.
I'm still unsure about whether this one would work out or not, but I'd love to see Monster Hunter Wilds come to Switch 2. The game is very demanding, and the Monster Hunter team is working diligently to correct some of that because of complaints during the beta test period. It was rough. Like, it was pretty tough to run the game. But the way I'm looking at it is like, if they want this to run on something like a Steam Deck, there's no reason it shouldn't also then run on a Switch 2.
The thing I find interesting about that is that Monster Hunter Rise is a wonderful Switch game.
Yeah.
Like it looks and performs extremely well. I remember at the time when I saw the title screen of that game, I was just blown away by what Capcom was able to manage on the Switch. And in gameplay, it's a very visually impressive game. Like it's one of the best looking games on the Switch, and it might be Capcom's best looking game on the Switch. So I think that they recognize that the Switch audience is pretty huge, and obviously Monster Hunter has very strong ties to Nintendo. I think it would be, Nintendo publicly confirmed that they modified the specs of, I think it was the Switch.
They doubled the RAM because of Capcom. And then Capcom shipped with Ultra Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, so I think Nintendo and Capcom have a particularly strong partnership, and I think that it would be weird to me if they didn't make their best effort to get Wilds running on the Switch 2, knowing that I think Monster Hunter games in particular, especially in the Japanese market, players value having those portably. And PlayStation can't offer that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess the other question is, like, if it can't run on Switch 2, or they just want to go a different route, they can make its own, like Rise, like a standalone Switch 2 focused Monster Hunter. That wouldn't be a launch title, but that's also possible. Maybe they skip Wilds and go straight to Rise 2 or whatever.
In like 3-ish, 4 years, the quote-unquote portable entry of Wilds will come out, and I guarantee that'll be a Switch 2 game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk a bit more about what I think Nintendo is going to do for the Switch 2 launch, because we've talked a lot about individual titles, but I think that there is going to be a massive NSO upgrade around the time of the Switch 2 launch. Like, we already know that the unlabeled button is more than likely a chat button on the right Joy-Con. And I think it'd be silly to not think that, voice chat, group chat, whatever that C button does is, I think it'd be silly to think that Nintendo's not going to brand that as an NSO feature. It almost certainly will be. But we're talking about launch games, not launch software features. But NSO, obviously, right now it's comprised of several different consoles. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an NSO Wii app come out of the launch lineup for Switch 2. Thinking about the idea of like RE4 with mouse controls, the larger idea there is that you could either use an improved form of the gyro in the Joy-Con themselves, because we've already seen developers try to replicate pointer functionality on Switch 1, or you could use the mouse controls to replicate just pointing at the screen, right? To give you an input interface to replicate motion. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw certain Wii titles as like Switch NSO expansion pack, like a new benefit to add to it when you pick up the console. Because when you get a new console, people are already looking to spend money, and this would be a great time to sell existing like normal NSO users the expansion pack by saying like, hey, if you pick up Switch 2 and you upgrade to the expansion pack, you'll get Wii games in addition to everything else.
Let's get bigger than this, because I think going straight from N64 to Wii is weird, because just skipping GameCube sounds odd. But you know what doesn't sound odd? Is just doing GameCube and Wii and DS and 3DS. Just all four at once. And maybe they'll pace them out more, but that mouse is also perfect for a touchscreen. Like, you can use touch in handheld mode, but you can also use the mouse in docked mode as like a cursor. You can do DS games and 3DS games very easily like that. And just GameCube as well. I mean, there's already a lot of GameCube games natively on the Switch, but I think you can do an app anyway, especially for multiplayer. But I think GameCube, Wii DS, and 3DS not only are possible, but it's also a great hardware upgrade incentive. Like, you have NSO on the Switch and you're kind of stuck with these older consoles, but the Switch 2 has the more modern, like more powerful 3D ones on NSO.
That would be an incredible like sales pitch. The Switch 2 is the everything console. If it's a Nintendo game, it's probably there. Like, that would be absolutely crazy to just have all of Nintendo's greatest hits from all of its major platforms just available on one system like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're building towards, right? They're trying to get complete libraries with a lot of their franchises.
Yeah, and I hadn't considered the idea that the mouse could be used to replicate touch input. which arguably is better than pointer input. Like, because right now that's the thing that the current iteration of the Switch is lacking. Like, if you tried to do DS or 3DS in particular on NSO on the Switch 1, it would be a bit fiddly, like trying to switch between the screens and input stuff on the touch screen. Whereas, with an inbuilt mouse, then you've got kind of an easy way of quickly moving between the top and the bottom display, and you could still use the buttons as dedicated face buttons the same way they would be, on the actual DS hardware. So, man, I could really see that. That would be really, really cool to have.
Yeah.
There are also a lot of DS and 3DS games where touch isn't even essential, or even the bottom screen. Like, I'm thinking of the original New Super Mario Brothers, and the only thing the bottom screen really is used for is it shows where in the level you are, and if you have a like an item in storage that you can tap it to bring it down.
And if you go down a pipe, the screen swap.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And that's something that they can just like goof around with in emulation.
Yeah. But conversely, the opposite is true of games like Phantom Hourglass, where you have to control it entirely on the touch screen.
Right.
And that would be hell to play on a controller. Like, it would be just bad. And so having a mouse where you're more agile would make a lot of sense there.
Yeah, I think that's possible. It does sound like a lot at once, but I also think it's just a big upgrade incentive to do that.
I also think it's Nintendo addressing something that the fan base has been screaming about for the last, 8 years, which is just this constant drip feed. Once a month we get a handful of games and you're subscribing to this service. It does a lot to turn that negative perception around by just being like, hey, we're announcing like a whole slew of things at once and you have access to all of these things. Now, will it happen? I don't know. I hope so, though, because it would certainly make my NSO subscription feel like it's worth so much more. But I'd argue that even where it's at now, it's at a really good value.
I don't want to be on this for too long, but I have one more question about DS and 3DS and Wii, I guess. They have their own online games, like Metroid Prime Hunters is an online game. NSO, by its default nature, you could do local play like Game Boy and Game Boy Advance very easily just through the app's functions. But would they revive Nintendo Wi-Fi connection for those games to play with randoms as well? Or would you just touch those features and it would tell you can't do that?
I think that there would be some kind of form of it. Like, it's interesting because this came up very recently. We did a video, or rather specifically, John, you did a video a long time ago on Pretendo, which was a wildly popular video. And it showed that people still want online support for their aging systems. And Nintendo, out of nowhere yesterday, was just like, don't use Pretendo, please. Like, we don't like that. It's insecure. And the timing seems suspect to me, especially given the conversation we're having right now. I could see Nintendo doing something very similar, honestly, to what Pretendo is doing, just in an official capacity. Like, standing up these kind of, for lack of a better term, like fan servers, like basically just setting up something that emulates the original setup just enough to where it works, and having it go through NSO. So like on the back end, it's all still just NSO, but it tricks, like if you connected with a DS, it wouldn't work. But if you connected through NSO, it would say, oh, this is an NSO connection, let it through. And I think that might be the solution that we end up with, where they revive the online for these games, but only if you're a subscriber.
And even if they don't, you can still do like online local, like you can just, as NSO usually works, you can just play any game online with someone. But I'd love for that random stuff to be carried forward. But
you would lose some features in some games too if that wasn't an option.
Exactly. But to move away from this for a second, can I paint you a picture? We're in the year 2004. We are playing Halo 2 in a LAN party. 8 Xboxes hooked up together, 8 CRTs. Now imagine there's no Xboxes and no CRTs, but 8 Switch 2s just all gathered together in one big local LAN. Do you think Halo could be a launch title?
That would be the funniest thing in the world to me. And I desperately want it to happen, if only because it would be funny.
I actually want this to happen because I like Halo a lot.
I do too. I should clarify.
Yeah, Halo 1 through 3 are goated for me.
Wow.
They're fantastic games. And so I just really, really want these to exist on the Switch too, because as much as I love those games, I'm not going to fire up my Xbox to play them. You know, the novelty has long since worn off of doing that, but you know, I still have, and I'm trying to keep fewer boxes. I still have my Genesis controller box for NSO because it's just the weirdest thing for me to see the Sega logo and the Nintendo logo together on the same box. I would instantly grab a physical copy of Microsoft Halo for the Nintendo Switch too. Like I would just have to have that the same way, you know, I have a physical copy of Lego Horizon for the Switch because it's a PlayStation game on my Switch. Yeah. I want these to exist. Also, just being able to do like portable Halo 2 for me would be really, really cool.
Yeah. You know what's cool as well? Halo Master Chief Collection on Xbox and PC has crossplay. But I'm pretty sure the way it works is it's mouse and keyboard players play with other mouse and keyboard players. And so you can hook up a mouse and keyboard to the Xbox and play with other PC players, or hook up a controller to your PC and play with controllered Xbox players. Technically, the Switch 2 mouse could allow it to be part of the PC group in a way. So you can play like mouse and keyboard with your Joy-Con.
That makes, you know, that brings up another question for me. I guess it's technically two questions. One, do you think that there will be a Nintendo like branded mouse grip that you drop a Joy-Con into to use? And two, are they going to release a standalone mouse that you can also use?
I'm going to go with no and no. And the reason why is because I think Nintendo is a big fan of their own Nintendo engineered solutions, like, and they very clearly kind of show in the trailer, like, you know, they heavily imply the mouse functionality in the Switch 2 trailer with just using the Joy-Con grip or the Joy-Con, gosh, what are they called? They're not
Wrist
Joy-Con
strap.
grips. Yeah, the Joy-Con strap. They show that like zooming along a table.
Yeah.
And so I think Nintendo is going to say, this is how you mouse, and we don't want to complicate it further. I think within 10 minutes, a third party will have made exactly what you're describing, and people will buy it.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Switch doesn't really have peripherals. Like every peripheral is something you put the Joy-Con into. And I think that's about the whole versatility of the system is the Joy-Con is everything. So you put it into the Ring-Con, you put it into like a wheel attachment. It's all about the Joy-Con bringing these things to life. And I think they'll probably continue with that rather than getting a mouse, like a physical mouse in there.
And I think Nintendo has been burned by the Wii era where there were so many different things you could put the Wii remote into, many officially made by Nintendo, that just kind of ended up in landfills everywhere. So I think that they know other people will come out and do these things that maybe a less restrained Nintendo would have done a while back. So I think they're trying to communicate the simplicity of the device by just being, like John said, the Joy-Con is everything you need in one package. And we're just going to, you know, that's why we never got a Joy-Con with a friggin' D-pad. Like Nintendo is scared of confusing their consumers at this point. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're just going to stick with simplicity, and we'll just mouse in this. Bringing it back to games though. John mentioned, you know, Halo and mouse and keyboard. And there's another Microsoft franchise that I think is going to appear at launch for the Switch 2, and that is Diablo. I think Diablo 4 will come to Switch 2 at launch.
I mean, Diablo 3
it just
did with Ganondorf.
Sense. Yeah,
it did.
The funny, and that's probably one of the funniest stories, is that it also had Link at one point, and they just kind of removed him, but it was in media, like it was in the game and shown off to media with Link, and then they just, I don't know what happened. It just kind of disappeared, and I guess someone at Nintendo was like, we don't like that. You can't do that. Here's Ganondorf.
Yeah, and that's another case where like Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 came to the Switch, so like if they could have done 4, they would have. And I think this is where they're going to correct that.
I mean, we even got a Diablo 3 special edition console. Like they did a special edition branded Diablo 3 Switch. So yeah, I think Microsoft will bring Diablo 4 to the Switch 2. I mean, it was wildly popular, but it was like that flash in the pan type of popularity. So I think pushing that game to a new audience might reignite some hype around it.
I'm a little surprised we've gotten this far without talking about Metroid Prime.
I was thinking in the back of my head, yeah. I almost think this might launch before the Switch 2 now. I think that in this, we've got like what, half a year probably until it launches. I think the Switch might get it beforehand.
Ooh, that's an interesting idea. I don't agree. I think that this is their. So I'm of the mind that the Switch 2 is going to have. This is going to sound weird, but like a family game, a quote unquote fun game, as in a not serious game, and then like a serious game. So basically, and we know as well as we can that Zelda is not part of the conversation because it just can't be. Tears of the Kingdom is too recent for there to be another AAA.
I would say one thing about that is Tears of the Kingdom was done in 2022, so we are like 3 years into development on a new Zelda. So like it's not impossible we see one, but yeah, it's not going to be a launch title.
Yeah, I would say there's no way it's a launch game. Could it be like year 2 or maybe end of year 1 a la Xenoblade? Quite possibly. But either way, I don't think Zelda's coming on launch. I think Metroid will fill that slot though for people who want like something a bit more dark, a bit more adult. And then you'll have, your 3D Mario, which I'm surprised we haven't gone full in on a 3D Mario. 3D Mario's coming. I refuse to believe otherwise. And then Mario Kart 9. Yeah. And I think those will be Nintendo's like big 3 for the launch of the console. Like they'll have 3 games ready to go on day 1, or at least within days of day 1.
I mean, we also have Pokemon Day next month. We're still waiting to see Pokemon Legends EA for the very first time. And at this point, we still don't know when that game actually comes out. Sometime this year, I assume. But when? And does that mean it's coming to Switch 2?
It's difficult to say. Like Game Freak historically have always just kept supporting the lower powered hardware. Like once the 3DS was out, they were still doing DS games. Once the Switch was out, they were still doing 3DS games. Now with this easier cross-platform delivery, I think it just makes sense that they'll do both. But we already know ZA is a Switch 1 game. But yeah, I reckon it's kind of a no-brainer that they'll do just a more tailored Switch 2 version as well.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see it at launch because if we haven't seen the game at all yet, I think we're still too far off from it for it to be a launch title. I did want to bring up another developer who has multiple Switch games that we haven't seen much of. Factor 5. Or Level 5, sorry.
I was about to say Factor 5. How far back are we going here?
Factor 5,
Level 5 of like things dated until 2026 at the moment, or 2027 maybe even.
Yeah, I wonder. So, do we think we're going to see anything about Switch 2 from Level 5? And do you think any of those games they've announced previously have made the jump over there, given their protracted development cycles?
They can. What they have this year is Fantasy Life and Inazuma 11. Neither of which would be very benefit. Like you can put them in 4K, but they're not beautiful games, are they? Like Fantasy Life is very much a budget game, and I don't know if that would change much on Switch 2.
That also comes out next month.
Is it next month?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Is it Fantasy Life is next month? Wow. I've been sleeping.
Layton as well. Like Layton, I'm pretty sure is next year. That could come to Switch 2 very easily, but it's probably going to look the same, but just at 4K, I imagine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Fantasy Life is in April.
Okay.
Fantasy Life is in April, is it? I could see maybe Fantasy Life either A, getting delayed past April, and getting that delay announcement inside of the Switch 2 Direct. Right, like they show it on April 2nd.
Should Fantasy Life be in a Switch 2 Direct though? Like that's very much a low performer Switch game. Like that's.
I'm actually convinced that we will have like a sizzle reel of just a load of third-party stuff that's lower priority in the Switch 2 Direct. And I think you could fit a game like Fantasy Life into, like, if you're just doing a montage, because Nintendo's going to want to communicate at some point in that Direct, like, we've got loads of games coming for Switch 2. And I could see Fantasy Life having like a quick 5-second blip in a sizzle reel on screen for sure.
Okay. Microsoft are legally obligated to put Call of Duty on Nintendo platforms. They haven't met their legal obligation yet. Probably they just can't do it on Switch 1. Will Switch 2 wait until the holiday Call of Duty, or will it get the previous one?
Oh, that's a tough one.
If I remember correctly, Wii U got an older Call of Duty at launch. Like it wasn't whatever was just out. And
Ghosts.
So I could see them bringing out God, what is it called? Black Ops Vanguard or something? Like I don't even know the name of the current.
We're not
Call
the
of
panel
Duty.
for this, but
yeah,
we know a Call of Duty will have to happen. It's just whether they wait until like November or whether they go ahead and do it in their launch.
I would actually say that Microsoft will likely bring whatever the current going concern in the world of Call of Duty is to the Switch 2 at launch. If for no other reason than, like you mentioned, to meet that legal obligation, because they've contracted with Nintendo, I think, to bring all quote unquote Call of Duty games to Nintendo platforms for the next decade, which I don't know if that includes this current one, but I'd imagine it would, because that contract was signed before this game came out. So I think they're likely waiting for the Switch 2 just to drop that title out there.
I'd think the window is too small to do the previous one, because we're thinking maybe it launches in June and then you have November for the next one. That's like 5 months. I reckon they can do Warzone, though, as a launch title. That's like their ongoing one. And then you go ahead and do the actual like brand new one in like November.
All their Call of Duties use the same launcher, so that would make sense.
Yeah.
So it'd already be there when the new game comes out.
I mean, I'll admit I had fun with Call of Duty on the Wii U. It was a novelty for me at the time as a Nintendo fan, like seeing Call of Duty. I was like, oh, neat. And I bought it and I played it, and I didn't have a terrible time, but I very much liked them when they were World War II games. They've strayed very far from God's light since then.
They've also not embraced handhelds much. Like Vita had an exclusive one. Wasn't very good. There's a mobile one. But other than that, like we had DS games, but we've never had just a full-fledged Call of Duty on a handheld. So this kind of would be a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of live service games, I'm going to throw this one out there. It feels like a no-brainer to me. Fortnite.
Oh yeah, that's happening. Yeah.
The Switch version of Fortnite is terrible. It is one of the most god-awful games on the entire platform, and I cringe for my kids because they play it obsessively on their Switches. It's a huge moneymaker for both Epic and Nintendo on the Switch. But that game runs like booty. Like it just needs any kind of upgrade. And I imagine going from playing it on the Switch to the Switch 2 will be like a night and day difference.
Absolutely. It'll probably benefit Epic Games in the long run too. I imagine they'll keep supporting the Switch 1 version for as long as they can. But it must hold back development somewhat, because that's the base version they have to develop for, because they have to keep Switch 1 in the run. And so maybe one day they stop supporting Switch 1 and Switch 2 becomes the new low-end base.
You could make the argument that they're not developing it as the base version, given how poorly it runs.
Well, it has to stick around. That's at least run, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but run is a very generous word with the Switch version of Fortnite. Like I'm not joking when I say it routinely is at like 15 FPS. Like it for a game that's a twitchy shooter, like the frame rates on it are insanely bad at times.
So I do have another game, and this game is definitely going to happen, and you can't convince me that it won't. It's going to be Diddy Kong Racing. They're going to release it at the same time as Mario Kart.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And Diddy Kong Racing is going to be the better of the two games.
Best I can do for you is Diddy Kong and Mario Kart. I'm sitting here and I'm kind of struggling, but we haven't talked a lot about Western developers. Ubisoft is almost certainly bringing like Assassin's Creed Mirage. I would imagine day one.
They'll also do Rainbow Six. They'll probably do The Division. I imagine they'll do a few things.
I wonder. They delayed the new Assassin's Creed to March, and we now know that is before the Switch 2 comes out. Do we think that the new Assassin's Creed set in Japan will be coming to Switch 2?
Yeah. They did Black Flag on the Wii U. I think they'll do anything they can. Ubisoft, I reckon, just want all the bucks. I reckon Switch 2 can run it. Yeah, I think they will.
That's kind of my opinion of the Switch 2 in general is if you ask me if a game's going to come to it, I'll just say, why not?
Yeah.
Like,
if it can, it will.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. It's funny to be here because like a few years ago, like it wasn't, if it can, it will. Like with the Wii U, it's like, yeah, that can run it, but it won't. But now it's very much a case of like developers do want their games on this. They will sell. If they can run, they will bring them along.
Yeah, it's a winning thing for everybody. Like Nintendo's perception increases a little bit because third parties are showing up, and then third parties are winning because they're actually making money on their investment.
Yeah. It's a shame. All the launched Nintendo games I'm thinking of are kind of racing games because I think one of the best ray tracing demonstrations you can do is wave race because that's all on water. It's all about reflections and the waves. I think that would be such a cool one, but you can't really have that alongside Mario Kart though.
At least it wouldn't. I don't think it would compete too much, given that it's such a different type of experience. And how many racing games on jet skis are there?
Maybe like month 5 we have wave race.
What about ARMS? Is ARMS dead forever?
Probably. I think it's okay. It's okay to have a one-off sometimes. Sometimes great games just have one game and they don't need more.
Yeah, it's tough for me to say. I think ARMS was a great showcase of what the Switch One could do from a visual perspective. Like it's a looker. It's an amazing game, but I do want to point out this is also ARMS was made by the Mario Kart team.
Exactly.
And so and we know Mario Kart's coming. So I think Nintendo seeing kind of the writing on the proverbial wall was like, okay, maybe not another ARMS right now. I wouldn't discount it forever, but I wouldn't put it as a launch title.
And let me pose a different question then, because, they wanted ARMS to kind of fulfill that big new IP Splatoon role, that edgy coolness that came with Splatoon. They tried to recapture with ARMS. Do you think they're going to do that again with another new IP?
We've seen it already, baby. That beta game, it's going to be the big launch title. We're going to be building. We're going to have blocks. I don't know much more about that game. But it's been a Switch 2 launch title all along, even though we've played it on the Switch 1, so it doesn't make much sense, but that's what it's going to be.
Oh, I played it on the Switch 1. I don't want to play it on the Switch 1.
But I think that is going to be something that, it'll probably be on Switch 1 as well, given that the beta was, but I think that's for sure going to be a new IP that's coming up soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. I mean, with the C button being like a community button, like it seems one of the things that I think we're seeing kind of evidence of is that Nintendo is going to make a major push for online connectivity on the Switch 2. Like the Switch 1's online is like baby online. Like there's no chat, there's no direct messaging. It's just kind of like a very halfway there solution. So I think that they're going to I think there will be a game that will necessitate all of these functions because Nintendo, if nothing else, loves to make games that show off why they've made some of the decisions they've made from a hardware perspective. So I think, we know the Switch 2 has a mic. We know that it has this dedicated button for like chat and stuff. There's going to be a game that pulls all of that together.
So what you're saying is Breath of the Wild Remastered has a 99 mode with 99 links roaming around, all causing chaos together. That's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Nice.
You joke, but I would be there day zero.
Exactly. One more question, kind of parallel to the Mario Kart ARMS question. Animal Crossing and Splatoon also share a team. Which one of those makes the most sense for a year one / launch title?
Well, I mean, it's been longer since Animal Crossing, right?
Yeah, Animal Crossing, also the bigger franchise. We don't know what it's going to be like post-COVID, but that has to have grown the franchise at the very least.
Also, the bigger fumble of the two. Nintendo did not handle Animal Crossing nearly as well as I would have hoped. The update cadence was too slow. They didn't add enough to it to keep players invested, and they could have sold mountains of DLC for that game. And
they just moved on to Splatoon 3 instead.
So yeah, I would say that Splatoon 4 needs more time to cook, like both from a design and a narrative perspective, but it also at this point needs some kind of revolutionary gameplay hook to it. Like Splatoon 1, 2, and 3 have been iterative and I would say that Splatoon 3 is just about as improved as you can get while keeping the core formula completely intact. I'd like to see a Splatoon 4 that introduces something that shakes things up.
Splatoon 1, 2, and 3 are also like almost the exact same hardware. Like Wii U to Switch is a jump, but it's not a drastic jump. So like 1, 2, and 3 are all kind of running on that base level. So 4 will finally have an actual like generational jump. So that's kind of exciting. But yeah, that franchise needs a shake up.
I think that extra juice is how we finally get Splatoon Splattle Royale.
That might be it. Maps have all been really small in like Splatoon 2 and 3. There's a lot of room to grow them.
Nintendo
Splattle Royale, I love that.
Nintendo not having its own like shooter style battle royale, I think, is a missed opportunity. And Splatoon is right there, and it would offer a very unique take on it. And having that as a like, I think you pitched that as like an NSO perk. This might not even be like a numbered Splatoon game.
That'll be interesting.
This might just be like a Splatoon 99 or like a free download, and then you just have tons of players playing all the time. And then that way, when Splatoon 4 comes out, you've now indoctrinated people.
I do like that idea. It might make it a bit trickier to sell Splatoon 4, but I do like the idea, though.
Yeah, they could do something similar to like Call of Duty, where like Warzone is a part of the full experience. It's in the package in total, but like, if you download the client, you have Warzone, but you need to buy the new Call of Duty, and at least for those games, that formula seems to be working.
True.
Did we lose Steve?
No, I'm here. I was trying to think. Like I was just.
We've talked about so many games, and there's still potential for more and more and more because every publisher is viable. Stalker 2 is possible because Stalker 1, 2, and 3 are on the Switch. At least the sub games are. Everything is possible from third parties. It's Nintendo that's the wild card.
Yeah, I feel like we're in a position where the possibilities are almost endless for what we could get, because a whole world of PS5 games opens up. Like you alluded to, John, PS4 is completely fair game. Like anything that could have run on the PS4 will certainly run on the Switch too. And that just opens up so many things that weren't possible previously. And I think that a lot of publishers, seeing how well the Switch 1 has done for them, are going to just try to get as many things as they can onto the Switch 2. I can't even begin to hazard a guess as to how many or what games specifically will be there, though we've certainly named a bunch. But I wouldn't be surprised if the day one lineup was over a dozen games, like not counting like eShop only titles, but like a dozen physical games that you could purchase.
Yeah, I mean, historically, like the Wii U actually had a lot of launch titles. I want to say there's like 24 or something. Switch, on the other hand, was very much a tailored launch lineup. But we have had north of 20 games before in the past.
Finally, Silksong. We can stop being clowns.
Oh,
people
boy.
are going to buy Switch 2s for Silksong. Maybe they will.
You never know.
I wonder if Silksong, I'm staring at a Hollow Knight desk mat right now, and I still don't believe Silksong is going to come out. It's just one of those things where I feel like Team Cherry has lost the plot development wise, and something's going on there that we don't fully understand, because Microsoft was very confident it was coming out this year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So when is it? Well, I feel like this is just one of those sad stories where it's not beholden to a platform holder. It's just the developers themselves are having a tough go of finishing the game out. So I'm not holding my breath for that one, and I don't think Nintendo is going to score it as like a launch title for the console.
I laugh at Silksong, but Switch launched with a Shovel Knight campaign, and it's not a bad idea, because like people picking up the system just kind of want games. So, like a console launch is actually kind of a good time for it. So I'm coming around.
A big
on it a
indie presence, I think, is important on Switch 2 launch.
I think having a marquee indie is really important, and Silksong would fit the bill. I do wonder, though, politically, if they maybe owe that launch to Microsoft at this point.
Yeah,
because I'm sure there was some communication between them saying, like, we get to announce the launch, we get to have it. And then when Team Cherry kind of, frankly, you know, made Microsoft look a little silly, I'm sure that there was some follow-up conversation that was like, okay, but you owe us that we get to drop it during a developer direct or whatever, because we put our necks out and said it was coming out this year and you didn't deliver.
Yeah. Are we tapped though? Are we tapped for games? We can keep shouting these forever, but we've been going for ages, and I'm pretty happy that we've nailed the launch lineup exactly.
Yeah, I think we are 100% correct. Nothing that we've said here is wrong.
Diddy Kong Racing is launching alongside Mario Kart 9. That's happening.
Exactly. And you definitely won't come back to this video the day of the direct to tell us how wrong we are.
No,
yeah, that's not going to happen. Nobody does
back to us to tell us that we're wrong.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Steve, why don't you tell people how they can join the winner's circle before we wrap up?
Absolutely. If you are a fan of what we're doing here at GVG, or even more specifically here on the Week in Nintendo, you can join our Winner's Circle over at patreon.com/gvgaming, where for just $5 a month, you get access to our Discord and you get to submit mailbag items for us to read out on the Week in Nintendo. This week, we didn't do that. It's kind of an unplanned week of a flurry of activity. So we'll resume regular mailbag readings on the next episode. But patreon.com/gvgaming is where you can find out all about that and all our other Patreon perks. So do check it out if you like what we do here. And Brandon, I'll throw it back to you.
Make sure to check all of the videos we did on Nintendo Switch 2 on the channel yesterday. There's a lot of stuff there for you to chew on if you haven't yet. But until then, we've got more Switch 2 coming here in April. Until then, keep the games good and the vibes greater. Bye now.
Goodbye. Bye, everybody.